The Game of Thrones reference in tonight's episode of Euphoria was, I think, the most meta HBO has gotten, because if HBO loves anything more than drugs, profanity, and nudity, it is referencing itself. Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we are talking about Euphoria Season 2, Episode 2. I forget what the name of the episode is, but I'll put it in here in editing. And we're here to review it and talk about the craziness that is every episode of Euphoria, but specifically tonight's episode. So in tonight's episode, for a brief recap, Rue and Jules are exploring the complexities of getting back together while Rue is still trying to hide her addiction and her relapse from Jules. Kat is struggling to learn to love herself and Ethan, and the drama of the Nate, Maddy, and Cassie love triangle only deepens. Narratively, for the most part, this episode is really just following everything that's set up in the first episode. For me personally, I think this episode does some really fun and interesting things, like that Game of Thrones reference in the cat imagination space that we know and love so well, but it definitely gets a little messy when you're trying to deal with so many different characters and doing the artistic, crazy things that Euphoria tends to do, and doing that on a scale that is much larger than just, say, one or two characters. This episode gave us a lot of background on a lot of people, as well as dealing with the present day for most of the characters. So I think in some ways tonight's episode was a little overstuffed, and if you found yourself with a character who was not necessarily facing the most interesting part of their story, or having to spend time with a character that you don't personally enjoy as much as others, I think tonight's episode could have been less polished or likable than the premiere episode. However, I do think this sets up some major things for the rest of the season and explains again why this show is like a drug. It is so appealing, it is so addicting to those who fall under its spell, and I am certainly one of those people. I realized part of what makes the show so addicting and so great and so appealing is the escapism of it all. For the most part, when people think about escapism, they think about fantasy series like Game of Thrones. That's really just gonna come up tonight a lot, isn't it? I guess so. Fantasy series or period pieces where today's issues or your personal issues are not being dealt with. But this show is the exact opposite. It's kind of like a car wreck that you just can't stop but watch, but it's like if cars crashed in slow motion and people didn't get hurt, except if they did, they were fictional characters, and that's maybe a bad metaphor. But what I guess I'm trying to say is, in this show, I never find myself relating to the characters. For the most part, my high school experience, and let's be honest, my adult experience, is much more aligned with the characters of High School Musical, the musical, the series, which I have been sent countless memes about how that group of kids is about to be the same age as the group of kids in Euphoria. Obviously, the actors are different ages, but the characters are supposed to be the same, and how they have these wildly different experiences, yet the target audience for both shows tends to be pretty much the same. Young 20-something girl who just likes TV. But I think this show is so fascinating because it's so unlike anything that I think a lot of its viewers have ever lived. And I have seen a really 180 turn for the second season of this series. I remember when the first series came out, a bunch of teenagers were watching with their parents, and at the time were claiming that this show was exactly accurate. And I think the first series did a lot more to kind of explain certain changes and trends that have massively increased from the rise of technology in teenage spaces. If you watch the pilot episode of Euphoria, I think you would see exactly what I'm talking about. But in this season, it's kind of those storylines have already been set up. Those establishments of the world in which today's teenagers do live in has already been established, and therefore it's kind of just running amok, and I like it. There's a beauty to it that this show explores, and all of the characters really have this main character energy and live their lives dealing with extreme emotions that are not healthy in real life, dealing with relationships that are not great in real life, but for some reason it makes for such compelling TV that I cannot help but watch it and enjoy it every week. Again, it is an escapism of something I will never experience in my entire life, and for that I'm very grateful, but that's what makes it interesting to watch. Visually, I think is where so much of the show does that. I talked a lot about that last week, so if you did miss that review, go ahead and go check it out. I will be making a playlist of all of my Euphoria reviews, but I loved how faded this season looks. Again, I talked last week about how the creator of the show, Sam Levinson, discussed how he wanted this season to feel like after a house party when people should have gone home and it's 5 in the morning and the sun is coming up. He wanted to feel faded and like a memory and all of these different elements, and I feel like this episode, especially the school scenes, but a lot of them too, like at Fezco's gas station, there's a lot of washed out faded colors, and not in a desaturated way by any means. The colors of this show are still on full frontal display, but I feel like everything kind of looks like if you were to go to sleep with your makeup on. Ladies, we've all been there, and you wake up in the morning and your eyeshadow and mascara is smeared, and your foundation, which looked great last night, looks a little faded and pale the next morning. The show has that to it, and I think think the care that has been given to the aesthetics of the show, again, makes it so fascinating to watch, because if it was all gray, boring realism, no one would want to watch this show. But because it's so visually appealing and so many cool things can be done with that, that's what makes it interesting. I think one of the coolest things that this episode did was I really liked the montage of Nate when he was in the hospital, kind of thinking through his feelings regarding Maddy, his dad, Cassie, all of those different things. I felt like that was a really beautiful artistic sequence. And again, the way in which it's shot, it's kind of glowing. It still has that faded feel, but it feels like a dream. And I love how that can just be translated through visuals. Obviously, we still have Rue's narration, which I think really does still ground the show in reality, but those things just make it so, so special. I also just love how this show can go from stupid rich kids being stupid rich kids, like Maddy trying on the clothes that she definitely shouldn't be wearing when she's babysitting, and also wearing something that was probably pretty inappropriate to babysit an 8-year-old boy in or something, but then in an instant it could go to like the most intense, devastating moment of something that feels like it could ruin the character's life or their future arc in the rest of the season. But that's again what makes the show so captivating, is these teenagers are living in these extreme highs and lows, and any sort of experience, even in that situation, Maddy maybe just would have gotten a slap on the wrist and been fired from this babysitting job, but it wouldn't have been the biggest deal in the entire world, depending on how the family chose to take it. Like, she wouldn't get arrested, her life won't be ruined because of that. But in that instant when they're pulling up in the driveway, the show creates a tenseness that is like a horror movie. And the same thing is done when Cal shows up at Fezco's gas station. At first it's just Lexi going in there and it's sort of awkward, like, does he like this other girl, because they clearly have feelings for each other. What an unlikely duo, but I love them. And then immediately when Cal enters the store, it feels like a gun standoff in a western, and like someone's about to die. And I love that this show has that unhinged intensity to it that just no other show on television today has. I also, again, love how this show corrupts my moral compass or the ethics of real life, because never, ever, if I had a friend who was interested in a boy like Nate Jacobs, would I tell them to date them. Yet I went last season from loving Maddy and Nate's completely unhealthy relationship to now loving Nate and Cassie's completely unrealistic and unhealthy relationship. And I hate that about this show, but also I will keep watching to see how it turns out. Again, I said this before, this wasn't my favorite episode of the series because I feel like it's trying to do a little bit too much, and I always feel like the show, the heart of it and the most compelling elements of it are when Jules and Rue are together, or they're dealing with the different aspects of their life that both attract them to one another but also mean they might not be the best for each other. And I like that that's being complicated with Dominique Figg's character, and kind of just the way that Rue is hiding something from Jules. She's sort of getting everything she's ever wanted with being on drugs and being with Jules, but she's already kind of corrupting that, and I'm interested to see where that goes this season. However, I think there's a little bit of messiness that distracts me from that. That, though, is going to be my review of Season 2, Episode 2 of Euphoria. What did you think of tonight's episode of Euphoria? Are you compelled this season? Do you feel different about it than you did the first season? Let me know in the comments down below, and please be sure to like this review if you did enjoy it. And if you want to see next week's review of Euphoria, be sure to hit that red subscribe button down there, turn it gray for me, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss all of my Euphoria reviews, as well as any other movie and TV and entertainment related content that I make on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an absolutely amazing night, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, y'all.